So Blade of the Immortal dropping its first 2 episodes. Amazon, I give Amazon some flack sometimes, but I gotta say, between Vinland Saga, we have Babylon, now Blade of the Immortal, getting not 1, but 2, sometimes 3 episodes on release day is just a blessing. And if I'm not mistaken, this is an Amazon-only show, both inside Japan and outside Japan. I think because it's a little too bloody for TV that this went straight to internet streaming, which is kinda cool, especially because it's supposedly going to be a full adaptation. Now, I don't know if they're going to try to do a full adaptation within the 24 episode season, or if we're going to get multiple 24 episode seasons, but right now, the future's looking pretty bright for this series, I have to say. I know nothing about the source material, except it's been one of the 3 or 4 series that, from anyone who is kind of like a manga junkie the same way that I am an anime junkie, would say this right here, if it could get a proper adaptation, would be one of the greatest anime ever made. That's just kind of the overall hype and just praise that I've personally experienced from people that I've known and have trusted their opinions on the source material. Based on the trailer, it looked like it was going to be bloody, it looked like it was going to have style and flair, and based on these first 2 episodes, it absolutely did. Now, some people kind of had their worries and just, they weren't sure, was Leiden Films the proper studio to adapt Blade of the Immortal? And I absolutely think they are. I just think they have a really solid idea on how to bring such an interesting world to life, where you have seemingly an immortal samurai who can just you cut off his leg, he holds his leg back together, and these worm-like parasites will just heal his leg within a matter of minutes. It's kind of insane. It keeps it not obviously completely realistic, but it still has a realistic samurai flair with the brutality, the gore, they have rape, they have a lot of really disturbing subject matter, and I mean, anytime you start off an anime episode, it has to give you a warning saying, hey, warning, this shit's insane. It kind of shows you're probably gonna have a good time with this. I really enjoyed this episode specifically for the style it had. Now, the overall characters, we have Manji and Rin, the 2 central characters, a girl who lost her family, who was just brutally murdered, mother raped, and then her head basically cut off and put on one of the killer's bodies. It's some insane shit, I have to say. And then we have this immortal samurai who basically atones for the sins of feeling like he was guilty for his little sister's death. And because this girl Rin has a very similar face to his little sister, he kind of feels indebted, otherwise he would have tossed her away, said, go find another bodyguard. The reason I like this isn't just because of those characters are great and we'll talk about them, but it is the style, the shot composition, the framing, everything about this radiates confidence and authority. There's so many shots that are so stylistic and will actually make you disoriented, maybe a little nauseated, because they shift things around and do things so quick and cut around, it makes you dizzy not knowing what you're seeing, and then you'll see severed limbs and heads and just body parts and the gore and brutality. Sometimes they really highlight the gore, other times they do some interesting techniques to cut away so they don't have to show it always, but it still gives you this artistic flair that it makes you feel like this doesn't look like anything from the past year. Now, there's great Mappa shows that have that old school feel, but there's something about this that has that old school feel, but also has something that feels like an artistic vision, not just an anime product, something like that. And that's why I think this adaptation is going to excel, even if it doesn't maybe adapt the manga properly. In terms of at least the visuals and just the composition and things like that, I think it's going to be something that people are really going to eat up, at least on a visual level, and hopefully the story and characters can continue through. There's just so many beautiful shots. The way they detail gore is actually beautiful despite seeing so much graphic violence. There's something about this show that just speaks to me. It's something that it has a little bit of comedy from time to time. We'll have, intense violence and gore and action, but it just has something that the look of it, the feel, the way the colors are just muted and then at times very vibrant, the character models, the facial expressions from how they'll go from, typical character models to ugly crying, something that actually feels like someone's disturbed and is tortured by what they're experiencing. This is why I love it. I love it when anime uses its visuals to tell a story, or at the very least to hook the viewer in a way you typically don't get to see. And I really think this show is going to excel. I mean, obviously I don't know the source material. I don't know if they did a couple of chapters, 20 chapters. I don't know about the overall adaptation, but for an anime-only perspective, I'm absolutely eating this up. Now, our 2 lead characters, we got the immortal samurai and a girl who wants revenge for her parents. And I really like the team up because most likely when a pairing like this happens, it's very driven by plot-centric reasons. But we know that our immortal samurai here is, he feels guilty. He's basically atoning for his sins. And a girl with a very similar face and basically around the same age as when she died, it kind of makes sense why he would feel, you know what, whatever I've been doing all this time really isn't making me feel any better. Maybe I can help this girl at least find peace in her own mind. And of course, that driven by rage and just revenge, but also not being a master killer, she's going to have her doubts and maybe is going to talk like a badass, but maybe not be able to swing the sword like one would. The first episode really gets this like serious atmosphere down exceptionally well. And I'm like, okay, if they just want to be dark and gloomy, that's going to be perfectly acceptable. It's obviously going to be depressing, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of depressing moments throughout this run. But when we get into the second episode, there's a lot more humor to it, but not that like forced humor that I'm sure some people are going to be like, oh god, more anime humor, ridiculous faces, you know, the typical bullshit you expect, which that bullshit can work in certain series, but you wouldn't think it would work in this series, but it's not present. The overall humor is just the natural humor of life, and that's the type of stuff where, you know, you get brought to this weird painter and you hear Ren being like, hey, I want you to also be my bodyguard, and this guy looks like a clown who's just painting, and he's like, well, I'm just done, and just the natural remarks and sass that will come to it, it just feels like the natural humor in day-to-day comedy. You can have unfortunate timing for what someone says in the face of death itself, and you know, depending on perspectives, it might make you laugh and then also make you a little uncomfortable. That's the type of humor that I felt within its second episode, that it didn't take away from the serious, but it also didn't hinder it in any way, kind of complement it in its own unique way. My favorite part of basically the combo episodes was when the painter's kind of just sitting there, not sure what shade of red to use, as basically our man is just slaughtering person after person after person. You kind of get in the background, and then one of his kills just blood all over the canvas, and he's so happy. And then one of the men comes in and tramples it, so then he ends up killing it. It's like, it's ridiculous, it's funny, but it is also serious all at the same time. And even though our character seemingly is, you know, immortal, it doesn't take away from the threat, because if he was to be decapitated or something like that, and should Rin get hurt, we would feel horrible. So I do think there is still a threat of danger even with the seemingly immortality here. And just the idea of trying to hunt down these samurais who have done you so wrong, it's just a gripping narrative no matter how you look at it. And just as we explore the world, we're going to learn so many personalities, side characters, maybe more main characters, great antagonists, and just the action from what we've seen so far is great. They definitely cut away and do some interesting shot techniques so they don't have to animate everything all the time, but it still gives it an artistic flair. So even when they're technically not animating something, it still feels artistic and interesting. And when we do get that smooth animation and just brutality, it's absolutely gorgeous and just mesmerizing. One of the other best parts of this kind of first two episodes is when we have our samurai fighting one of the people who has one of the blades of Ren's father, which she desperately wanted. And that was actually pretty interesting, because typically what I would expect to happen in a series like this is one would leave alive, one would leave dead. Basically, you would be in that swamp, something like that. But they both eventually end up parting ways. They both get wounded, but not to the point that there's a fatality, but he ultimately wins the battle, so he gets the sword back. I really like that specifically because there's like this honor and respect between the two. It almost feels like they're having fun, like this is their life. They love swordplay, and someone who can match their skill set or just mentality, it's almost like you want it to last as long as you can before you have to actually cut off their head or deliver the fatal blow. That's what I really like about this show, is it understands that it can be realistic and gritty and brutal, but maybe have a slightly supernatural twist with the seemingly immortality, but driven by such human bonds and relationships that I really think this is going to excel as one of the best anime of 2019. And there's a lot of fantastic anime of 2019, don't get me wrong. And this series, I don't know, maybe it will really poorly adapt the manga and it will become just a complete mess. But based on the first two episodes, it kind of feels like it has a structure, it has a direction it want to follow, and the fact that it has been confirmed to be a complete adaptation, I don't know if that means they're gonna do a complete, you know, quote unquote complete adaptation within 24 episodes, or if it'll be multiple seasons. But the fact that Amazon kind of has like this exclusive rights to it with the streaming and everything like that, I'm curious if it is going to be a 2 or 3 season show. I mean, I know the manga is pretty decent, but maybe someone can tell me in the comments how many chapters did these first 2 episodes adapt. Maybe it'll give us a better understanding on the overall pacing. I mean, sometimes it looks like they're following great, and then episode 10 comes around, they adapt 20 chapters. So that could happen, but just based on everything that I've seen, it almost feels like this could be the Blade of the Immortal adaptation people have been waiting for. And as someone who's never experienced the story in any way, it almost feels like maybe I am experiencing the best case scenario instead of watching some of the previous anime or things like that. Now, if I'm not mistaken, maybe some of the live actions weren't half bad from what I've been told, but it kind of feels like maybe we're actually getting the story that it's supposed to tell, or maybe completely went off the manga and it's doing its own anime original thing. Either way, at least the very first 2 episodes have been fantastic so far. I just love anime that have an interesting style and interesting visual flair, and this show absolutely has it, and its 2 central characters are fun. They have some interesting banter. It actually feels like a big brother, little sister relationship is forming, which I actually appreciate, because typically it's just kind of forced romance right off the bat rather than something that feels a little more human and genuine. And something I really enjoy the most would be our main man's voice actor, who actually voiced Kate in Copcraft last season. He's a great voice actor across the board, but it's almost an identical voice to what he did for Kate in Copcraft. If you haven't watched that anime, I actually really like that. I just love his he almost always feels serious, but even when he's joking, he kind of has this sense of seriousness to his voice. And I think that's the perfect actor to cast for this man. It just feels like someone you want to follow, you want to smack him upside the head, but you also know will have your back when it counts, as long as you're on his good side. And currently, Rin is on his good side. This first 2 episodes, I'm just smiling, I'm excited, I can't wait for episode 3. It really feels like we're onto something with this fall season. You know, there's a lot of surprises this season that maybe won't go, overly appreciated, maybe some people won't realize, because I think this is classified as an ONA, not a typical TV anime, but I hope this one gets massively popular and excels with its story and visual department, as so far right now it seemingly absolutely is. The music, also really good. Probably my favorite opening of the season right now. The ending's great, don't get me wrong, but there's something about the opening, it's starting to rock out and then it kind of transitions into more peaceful but sort of hype music. It's just like, it's the perfect opening for a series such as this. I love this. I really love this. Great first 2 episodes, what can I say? But I'm be interested to hear for anyone who has any experience with Blade of the Immortal from some of the other projects, the original manga. Let me know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have any news. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.